Well, about a week ago, I asked one of the leaders of the middle school students in our ministry here at the church to gather up some of the students and ask them this question: what does it mean to be a leader? And we'll share some more with you in the podcast later this week. I got some really good responses from that, and I think my favorite one was just 3 words long: middle school student, whether 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. What does it mean to be a leader? To lead people. I'm like, yeah, you got it. I'm proud of you. That's awesome. But there was one that was really good. And if I knew the middle school student who wrote this, I would have them come up and I would have them preach the sermon. Because this is like seriously about what I'm going to say today. Here's what they wrote: being a leader means to be able to show the people you're leading the right path to take and then guide them in a positive direction. It's pretty good, isn't it? That's not bad. We've been in this series. We're calling it Lead Like Jesus. It's based off of a book, which you can pick up in the Next Steps resource room. And what we're doing is we're looking at the life of Jesus and examining his leadership strategy so that we can be the best leaders as possible. Whether that be in our work environments or in our communities or in our homes, we want to be the type of leaders that Jesus was. And so far in week 1, we talked about the heart of the leader. Last week, we talked about the head of the leader. Today, we're going to talk about the hands of the leader. And really what it comes down to is this: that there are 3 types of different hand positions that a leader can take. 1 of them Jesus took, 2 of them Jesus did not. The first type of hand position is what I like to call the pointing finger leader. And the pointing finger leader leads like this: I am number 1, and you are number 2, and so therefore you have to do what I tell you to do. Many of you may have led like this before. Many of you have been led like this before. The pointing finger leader. This is not the way that Jesus led. The other type is the closed-fisted leader. And this type of leader says, I'm at the top, and I've got all of the skill and the knowledge and the talent in the world, and they really do, but they refuse to share it. They refuse to train others up because they lead with a fear that they're going to lose their position. And so they become hoarders of talent and knowledge, refusing to train others up. And that is not the way that Jesus led. Instead, the final one is the open-handed leader. And this is the leader that says, I'm going to use my influence to develop my team, and I'm going to empower them, and I'm going to serve them so that I can send them out. And Jesus changed the world with this type of leadership. And if you want to change your legacy or change your home or change this county or change the world, then this is the type of leadership model that you are going to need to adapt. In fact, I want to give you the bottom line up front today, and I'll give it to you a couple of more times so that we're all very clear. What I want you to get today is that if you want to lead like Jesus, then you must serve with open hands. That's what you've got to do. If you want to lead like Jesus, you must serve with open hands. It's with his hands that Jesus healed the sick and cleansed the lepers and fed the hungry and washed the feet of the disciples and hung from a cross to save us. And it was his open-handed leadership that allowed Jesus to take his disciples, call them, guide them, and then commission them, send them out. To help us with this today, I want to look at the relationship between Peter and Jesus. And I want to go through these 3 different things that Jesus did for Peter: the call, the development, and the commission. Let's start with the call of Peter. Matthew chapter 4 is where we're going to go for this. If you have a Bible and you want to get there, it's going to be up on the screen as well. The call of Peter, this is whenever the leader, Jesus, invites him in. Matthew chapter 4, Jesus has already been baptized. He has already been out into the wilderness to be tempted, and he's began to preach around this area. And then we get chapter 4, verses 18 through 20. Bible says, one day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew. They were throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. I want you to catch this. Jesus calls Peter to follow him, but he doesn't just leave it at that. Like, he doesn't just go up to this random fisher guy and just says, hey, come follow me, because if he had done that, Peter might not have seen the value in leaving his family and his business and his place in the community in order to follow this guy. Why does Peter so easily drop his nets to leave all of that? Because Jesus called him to something. And Jesus called him, he gave him direction and said, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. I'm going to show you how to fish for people. Without that clear and direct call, Peter is unsure of what he's actually stepping into. And whenever you lead, you've got to make sure that as you're taking people under your wing, that you are calling them to something clear, that you are giving them direction, that you are calling them towards some goals. That's what Peter had in the leader of Jesus. And then you move on to the development of Peter. And this is when Jesus uses his hands to guide him. And this is where we really get going with Jesus' open-handed leadership style. Because once the call has been made, Jesus needs to develop or disciple Peter. And as he does this, many things are learned about what it means to be an open-handed leader. Today, I want to share with you 2 stories and point out 4 things that an open-handed leader does. Story number 1 between Jesus and Peter, Matthew chapter 13. Verse 13, Bible says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. And so then Jesus asked them, but who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied, you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Stop the story right there. First half of the story, we see what an open-handed leader does is praise whenever something is right. Whenever somebody gets something right, the open-handed leader is the first to step in and to encourage them, and to celebrate with them, and to praise them because they got it right. And so Jesus is saying, Peter, I'm proud of you, man. Like, you got this. You're tracking with me. You understand, and I know that you understand because, man, I'm sure that my Father is revealing this to you. You are tracking with me. You are well on your way to becoming a fisher of men. You are getting this right. And the servant leader, the open-handed leader, praises when something is right. But, however, if you've been around church a little bit, you know that there's more to this story. So, second part of this story, second thing an open-handed leader does. Verse 21. From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the 3rd day he would be raised from the dead. Verse 22, but Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Heaven forbid, Lord, he said. This will never happen to you. Quick side note, you ever find yourself reprimanding the Son of God? You are probably wrong. That's what Peter does. And so Jesus turns to Peter and said, get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. Peter, look at me, listen. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. And so what does the open-handed leader do for the person that he has influence over in this situation? He corrects him when something is wrong. Not only is the open-handed leader the first to praise when something is right, they're also the first to step in and gently correct whenever something is a little bit off. Call them to something higher. Do you hear Jesus' call to Peter? You're not seeing it the right way. Let me begin to help develop you so that you can see it the right way. The open-handed leader praises and corrects. Here's story number 2. Matthew chapter 14, this is the story of Jesus walking on the water, and we're told this. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified, and in their fear they cried out, it's a ghost! But Jesus spoke to them at once. Don't be afraid, he said, take courage. I am here. Then Peter called to him, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water. Yes, come, Jesus said. And so Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. Stop the story right there. This is a really, really important thing that an open-handed leader does. He empowers. He lets those who he has influence over do the things that he is doing. When Peter takes a step of faith and cries out, Jesus, I want to come out there with you, Jesus recognizes his ambition and he says, yeah, come on out. I don't really know if the water's warm because I'm on top of it, but come on out. I want you to be out here with me. And you have to let other people do the things that you are doing. Sometimes we fall into a leadership trap in our culture. See if you can finish this phrase with me. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. But can I challenge you a little bit and say that that is the type of leadership that is closed-fisted? That's closed-fisted leadership. The only thing that you are caring about in that moment is whether or not the goals that you have are getting accomplished. You are completely neglecting the person you're leading. Instead, the open-handed leader empowers people to do the things that they are doing, even when they know it's not going to get done the right way. They're still going to empower them. The story continues. Matthew chapter 14, verse 30, but when Peter saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted, and Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. You have so little faith, Jesus said. Why did you doubt me? Stop here again. Another thing that the open-handed leader does is help. So he empowers, allow them to do the things that you are doing, but then he also helps. He's the first to step in when something goes wrong. And when Peter began to sink, Jesus' reaction was to immediately grab him and help. Now, I think that one thing we do sometimes when we read the Bible is we like to try and make things happen very quickly. And so what we imagine when we read this story is that Jesus reached down to help Peter up, and then they were back in the boat and everything was fine. But what I want you to imagine with me for just a second is that we don't really know how long Peter was walking on the water before he got terrified. He could have very easily stepped out of that boat and walked 10 yards, or 20 yards, or 30 yards before a wave comes crashing around him and he loses sight of Jesus. And so not only does Jesus have to reach down and help him, he also very likely has to guide him or even carry him back to the boat before everything is okay again. And when the open-handed leader takes someone under their wing, they have to develop them and they must be present to help whenever a stumble occurs, because a stumble is going to occur. And Jesus was the type of leader who gave his followers a clear and direct call and then constant guidance along the way. For a guy like Peter, it was really constant. And we don't have time to go through all of the interactions that they had, but it's throughout their entire relationship that Peter succeeded and then Peter failed. And throughout their entire relationship, Jesus was there to help, empower, correct, and praise. And through that process, once Peter was ready, he was given a commission. And the commission of Peter is when the hand of Jesus sends him out. A gentle little push. Jesus is already crucified. He had risen from the dead. And later, he's having breakfast with his disciples. John chapter 21, he pulls Peter aside. Verse 15, after breakfast, Jesus asks Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, Peter replied. You know I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know that I love you. And Jesus looks at him and says, Peter, then take care of my sheep. A third time, Jesus asked, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. You guys know why? Because not a few nights before, Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. And so Jesus is reinstating him, asking the question, do you love me 3 times? And so he responds, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And so Jesus looked at him again and said, then feed my sheep. I want you to miss this. This is not Jesus' recommendation for Peter. Jesus is not looking at Peter and he's not saying, hey, I thought it would be pretty good idea. I mean, I'm the son of God. I've got good ideas, right? So I thought it'd be a pretty good idea if you would just, go ahead and take care of my sheep. That's not the interaction that Jesus and Peter have here. The interaction that Peter and Jesus have is that Jesus is commissioning him. He's commanding him, you are going to go feed my sheep. This is what you are going to do. Go out, feed my sheep, take care of my lambs. This is a command. And so Peter, after he has been clearly called, after he has been developed and then commissioned, he's actually able to execute what Jesus had for him. And in Acts chapter 2, Peter preaches the first Christian sermon and 3,000 people are baptized. That's a pretty good sermon. Acts chapter 3, Peter heals a man at a gate. Acts chapter 4, Peter is asked to stop preaching, and he's like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to keep going. Acts chapter 6, Peter calls more people together and begins to lead a team that's going to be able to accomplish more ministry care. Peter executes what he was called to because he had a leader that served with open hands. Jesus clearly defined the call, demonstrated during the development, and then encouraged in the commission. And if you want to lead like Jesus, then you've got to serve with open hands. And those are the three things that you need to make sure that you are doing as well. And so let me walk through these with you and begin to help you think through what this could look like. If you want to lead like Jesus with open hands, you are going to clearly define the call. Clearly define the call. One of my favorite days as a college student, and you guys are going to call me a nerd, and you'd be right, it was syllabus day. Syllabus day was my favorite day. Not because we got out of class early, although that was a big plus, but syllabus day was the day when everybody got on the same page. Syllabus day was the day when the professor got the whole class together and said, hey, here are the course objectives. Here's what I am calling you towards. And by the end of this semester, you're going to be able to do this, this, and this. And here are the assignments that you're going to accomplish on the way to get there. It was a clear and direct call on syllabus day. And whenever you are leading people with open hands, you're going to need to give them a clear call and communicate to them where you would like them to go. If you don't do that, then there won't be any clarity. And if there isn't any clarity, there aren't going to be any results. And so, have you actually communicated to your employees what the vision and mission and values of your organization are? Have you sat down with each of them and have you set some goals for them and said, hey, here's what I'm calling you towards. I want to help you get there. Have you sat down with some of the people that you have influence over, maybe in your classroom or on your ball team, and have you actually communicated to them what your goals for the season are? And have you told them that you are going to do what it takes to help them get there? Have you communicated to your children or to your grandchildren what it is that you expect of them? Have you given them clarity? Have you told them what the mission, the vision, the values are for your house? And have you set some goals for them to help them get there? If you don't give a clear call, there's not going to be clarity. And whenever there is no clarity, there is no results. When you call people, you've got to call them to something. And then once you do, you've got to demonstrate while you develop. I played a lot of soccer when I was a kid, from age 4 all the way till age 18. So for a long time, you would think I'd be better than I was. One of the best coaches I ever had was a guy from England. His name was Jay Sparrow, and I'm not going to try his accent because you guys will mock me. Here's the reason Jay was one of the best coaches I ever had. Every time he was about to run a new drill so that we could develop a new skill, he would not only explain in detail what he was expecting us to do with that drill, he would also demonstrate. The guy's from England. He can play soccer. So he showed us how to work our way through this drill. Not only did he call us to it, but he showed us exactly what to do. Even in preseason training, which preseason training, middle of August for San Antonio, pretty much you just run until you puke. And what Jay did was he ran with us. If we were going to run 5 miles, he was going to run 5 miles with us. If we were going to do sprints, he would do it with us. And he demonstrated that, and we respected him so much because he was willing to give us clear direction and then show us exactly what he wanted. And if you want to lead with open hands, you've got to demonstrate as you develop. Praise, correct, empower, and help. Parents, you are trying to raise kids that love God, serve others, and that can take care of themselves. Have you praised them when they get it right? Have you corrected them and called them to something better and higher whenever they're a little bit off? Are you empowering them, and are you helping them along the way? Managers and leaders at work, you've got to get this one right. It is so easy in that setting to become a pointing leader finger. So easy, but you've got to get it right. Open-handed leadership, you start with praise before correction, and then you empower them. Coaches and teachers, pay attention. Sometimes even your most frustrating student or player is doing the best that they can, or at least the best that they know how to do. And as you are paying attention to all of this, you have got to set the example. Here's a quote that I heard in Bible college: you cannot lead people to places that you will not go. You cannot take someone somewhere you have never been yourself. And if you have called your employees to be men and women of integrity, then you'd better demonstrate what that looks like. If you have called your students to respect, then you'd better demonstrate what that looks like. If you've asked your kids or your grandkids to spend 5 minutes with Jesus every day, then you ought to be doing 10. Quote from the book: good leaders never ask anyone to do anything they are not willing to do themselves. And so you've got to demonstrate as you develop. And then once they are ready, you encourage in the commission. Jesus sends out the disciples and he says, I am with you always to the end of the age. Summer, August 2015, was the month that there was a natural change in the dynamic of the relationship between my parents and I. Because that was the summer that they dropped me off at college. And although this is not always the case, in most cases, it's usually the transition from ending high school into whatever's next that kind of marks the end between a development stage that a parent has over their teen, over their student, over their kid. Now, that does not mean that you have lost influence. That does not mean that your leadership in their life is over. What it does mean is that it changes just a little bit. And whenever my parents dropped me off at college, as they were pulling away, I was confident that there were not two people in this world who were going to praise, correct, empower, and encourage me and help me more than my parents. They were cheering me on the whole time. That was 2015. It's 2022 now. I've been through college. I graduated. I moved out here to a state they never thought I'd live in. And still, to this day, they're two of the most encouraging people in my life. I know for a fact, actually, that my dad is probably going to watch this at some point, and he's probably going to praise and correct. But I know that they're in my corner. They really could have said something like, I am with you always. How can you do that for the people that you're ready to send out? Servant leaders, open-handed leaders, take people and develop them into leaders because they understand that it's not about themselves. It's always about others. And so you'll take people under your wing, you'll call them to something, guide them and develop them, and then commission them, send them out. In the summer of 2017, I interned at a church outside of Austin, Texas, and at the end of the summer, the youth minister and a few of the students that I had a relationship with by the end of the summer, they shared the story of John chapter 13 with me. I want to share that story with you today. John chapter 13, Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return to God. And so he got up from the table, took off his robe, and wrapped a towel around his waist. He poured water into a basin, and then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he had around him. Verse 12, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. And so after they shared that story with me, they gave me this basin right here. It came from Pottery Barn. And this is really important to me. If you walk by my office or you come see me in my office, the first thing you'll notice to the left is a little coffee table, and this sits right on the coffee table. And it is a reminder to me every single morning that I step into the office that if I'm going to lead like Jesus led, then I'm going to serve others with open hands. And so today, that's what I'm going to do. I want to invite Charles, Joey, and Jeremy to come up onto the stage. One of you can have a seat. These three boys are a big part of our youth ministry. They're all in 11th grade, right? 10th grade, 11th grade, something like that. They're high schoolers. There you go. We went out to CIY Move this last summer, and CIY was a really great week. And all three of these boys decided at that week that they wanted to pursue vocational ministry in the church. And I'm really excited about that. But what I want to do with the rest of our time together today is I want to serve them, tell them some stories, or really give them a couple of pieces of advice, and let you guys listen in. Does that sound good? Okay. Charles, Joey, Jeremy, I'm proud of you guys. And man, I want you to know that if you are serious about going into vocational ministry, church leadership, that you're not only wanted, but you're also needed. And this is a really important thing that you feel like the Lord is calling you to. And so I want to share a couple of pieces of advice with you and really tell you that if you want to serve in the church, that there are two types of closets that you need to be a part of. The first closet is the prayer closet. Jesus preaches the most famous sermon ever, much better than the sermon I'm preaching right now. Matthew chapter 6, he's talking about prayer, and he actually calls out the Pharisees and religious leaders because they had prayed obnoxiously. And he says, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and when the Father who sees you in secret will reward you. I went to college with a guy, had a professor named Chris DeWelt, and he tells a story about his dad. His dad got up every single day at 4 a.m. When was the last time you got up at 4 a.m.? No, yesterday. Wow. Okay. All right. Got up at 4 a.m. every day, and he put on his best suit, went into the bathroom, did his hair all nice, got his cologne on, and then immediately went to his closet and shut the door. And as he was shutting the door, he stepped in, and he just spent some time with God, praying and adoring and giving thanks and confessing and seeking the Lord on behalf of others. And I just got to tell you guys, if you want to be a leader in the church, then you've got to start doing that now. Not just your first day of Bible college, should that be the path that you go on. Not just your first day on a staff at a church. Not just the first day that you maybe go overseas to preach the gospel. You've got to start doing that now. That's the prayer closet you've got to get into. The second closet that you have to get into is the chair closet. And you guys know very well that every church has a chair closet. Where's ours? Boom, right there. Joey, you pointed. It's on the other side of this wall. And man, my church, when I was growing up at too, had a chair closet. It was nowhere near as clean as the one that we have. And there's something about a chair closet that communicates something, and it really has more to do with this sermon than the other closet. But I remember when I was about 6th grade, the church had an event, and I was staying around after the event to help out, and what that meant was that I would pick up chairs and take them over to that chair closet. And I don't even remember who it was, but this is one of the first times somebody said anything to me about ministry. They saw me picking up chairs and taking them to the closet, a job that nobody else wanted, and they said, "You might be a good minister." And I was confused, didn't understand until now. A good minister, a good servant, an open-handed leader does the job that no one else wants to do. Now, what this person didn't understand at the time was that I was really just trying to show off my super strength for all of the cute girls in the youth group, right? You know? But nonetheless, if you want to be a leader in the church, you're going to have to find yourself in the chair closet, serving others and doing the job that no one else wants to do. You've got to start to become selfless. You've got to start to become a servant. When Jesus washes the disciples' feet, I think it's so interesting that the story starts out with, Jesus knew that he was the Son of God and that he had authority over all things. Jesus was an important dude, would you agree? And yet he still got down and took the form of a slave and did the job that nobody else wanted to do. And to the three of you, I just want to over and over and over again tell you, you've got to do that. You've got to do the job that nobody else wants to do. And if you get that right, and if you get over yourself, and if you stop being selfish, and you start being selfless, then there's no telling what the Lord can accomplish in your life. And so what I have done for the three of you, you go and do for others. Thanks, guys. Bottom line, if you want to serve like Jesus, you will serve with open hands. Not the pointing finger, not the closed fist, but with the open hands. And so this week, open up your hands, and here's the challenge. Do something for someone that you lead this week. Do something for someone that you have influence over this week. Praise them when they get something right. Gently correct them and call them to something higher when they are off. Empower them and help them. Listen, church, if you want to lead like Jesus, you've got to serve with open hands because that's what Jesus did. And his hands were most open in a display of service that I will never understand. Whenever he hung up on the cross and his hands became bloodied so that ours could become pure. And when you and I, without receiving the grace of Jesus Christ, when we cry out to God, we actually cry out with blood on our hands. Because of the sin and the brokenness in our life, because of how we have mistreated others, because of how we have taken God and we have belittled him and turned our backs against him and said, no, I'm going to serve myself and I'm going to get what I want out of life. But guys, that's not the best way to live. When you live that way, you cry out to him with blood on your hands. But here's the good news. You can cry out and say, I don't want this blood anymore. And Jesus' hands open, his hands became bloodied so that yours could become pure. So that you could receive the righteousness of the Son, so that the Father in heaven who created you could see you as pure and holy and innocent, so that you could live in the presence of God, not just now, but forevermore. And if this is where you're at today, and you need to cry out to God and say, God, I want you to save me. You are going to be the Lord and the Savior of my life. I believe with all of my heart that you are who you said you are. If you're ready to do that, then let's do that today. Some of you have been waiting around way too long, and it's time to go. And so what we're going to do at the end of this service today is give you a chance to respond. If you've got a decision to make, whether it's a first-time decision for Christ, or a decision to open up your hands for crying out loud and serve others, or any other type of decision, or if you need prayer, then now is the time to do it. You can use your connection card and drop it in. We'll be in touch. Or you can come find me right here. And let me talk with you and pray over you because I'm excited about what the Lord is doing in your life. Don't miss the movement of the Holy Spirit right now. Respond, and would you come forward? God, I am grateful. I'm grateful that you loved us so much. In fact, that you loved us in this way, that you sent your Son to die so that whoever believes in him does not have to die, but can actually live forever. And so, God, we cry out to you with praise and thanksgiving because of how well you have served us. We will never understand, but we can cry out. And so today, Father, we praise you for the activity and the faithfulness that you have in our lives. You've shown up time and time and time again. And I'm praying right now that as we think through what it looks like to lead like Jesus, that we would open up our hands and get over ourselves and begin to be selfless. not to be served, but to serve. God, I know that this church is capable of changing the world. And so I pray that today they would be encouraged, that they would leave this room looking more like your Son, hands open and ready to serve. We love you, our King, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.